You ever have one of those weekends where you just know something's gonna go sideways? Yeah, that was me, Quentin Fuller, proud homeowner, grill master, and apparently the new target of our overbearing HOA president, Karren Whitmore. It started Saturday morning. My parents had driven down from upstate to visit, first time in months. I was setting up the backyard when my dad called out, "Hey, Quentin, some ladies stomping up the driveway." I looked up, and there she was, Karren, storming over with her signature clipboard and that scowl that could sour milk. "You can't have unauthorized guests parking on the street," she barked before I could even say hello. "They're my parents, Karren," I said, keeping my voice calm. "They're visiting for the weekend." Karren flipped through her clipboard like she had some sacred law written down. "Visitor parking is for guests, not street parking. This is a violation." She jabbed a finger toward my dad's old Ford truck, which was parked neatly at the curb like every other car on the street. My mom, bless her, tried to smooth things over. "Madam, we're just visiting our son." "We'll be gone Monday." Karren wasn't having it. She got right up in my mom's face, yelling about bylaws and threatening fines. When my dad stepped in between them, Karren shoved him hard enough that he stumbled back a few steps onto the grass. "That's it," I said, pulling out my phone. "You lay a hand on my parents, you're dealing with the cops." Karren crossed her arms and sneered, "Go ahead, I run this neighborhood, perfect." I dialed 911 right there, loud enough for everyone to hear. The dispatcher answered quickly, and I kept my voice steady as I explained what had happened, making sure to say loud enough for Karren to hear. "Yes, an assault just occurred. The woman's still here." Karren's face twitched like she wasn't sure whether to bolt or double down. She must have decided on the second, because she started blathering about how she was authorized to enforce community rules. Dad rubbed his arm, shooting me a look that said he didn't want trouble, but he wasn't about to back down either. Mom stood behind him, clutching her purse tight, her lips pressed into a thin line. A few neighbors peeked out from their windows, drawn by the raised voices. Some even stepped onto their porches, pretending to water plants or sweep their steps. Within minutes, a patrol car rolled up. 2 officers stepped out, one male, one female, both looking professional but alert. The male officer approached first. "Afternoon, sir. You the one who called?" "Yeah," I said, pointing at Karren. "She assaulted my father." Karren jumped in before the officer could ask anything else. "I'm the HOA president. I have the right to enforce parking regulations. These people were violating the rules." The female officer raised a brow. "Madam, parking violations don't give you the right to put your hands on someone." "I didn't hurt him," Karren snapped, her voice rising. "He was obstructing my duties." Dad stepped forward, calm but firm. "She shoved me. I stumbled back onto the lawn." The male officer nodded. "Did you want to press charges, sir?" Dad looked at me, then at Mom, and finally said, "Yes, she had no right." Karren's mouth opened and closed like she was trying to find a spell that would make the situation disappear. Instead, the female officer gently but firmly took her by the arm. "You're under arrest for assault," she said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "You can't do this." Karren shrieked as the cuffs clicked into place. "I'm on the board. I know the mayor." The officers exchanged a glance that said they'd heard it all before. They read her rights while she kept struggling, her clipboard slipping from her fingers and landing on the sidewalk with a loud crack. Neighbors were openly watching now. Mrs. Howell across the street dropped her gardening gloves and stared, mouth agape. Mr. Tran, who had always kept to himself, pulled out his phone and started recording. As the officers led Karren toward the cruiser, she twisted her head around and shouted, "You're all going to regret this. I'll have all your houses foreclosed." The male officer calmly opened the cruiser door and guided her inside. Once the car pulled away, the neighbors started murmuring among themselves. Some looked relieved. Others looked downright giddy. It wasn't every day the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA got hauled off in handcuffs. The officers had left one more patrolman behind to take statements. I gave mine first, sticking strictly to what happened. Dad and Mom each told their side too, careful and clear. As we finished, Mr. Tran wandered over, still holding his phone. "I got it all on video," he said, glancing at me, "if you need it for court or whatever." "Thanks, Mr. Tran," I said, genuinely touched. "That could really help." He nodded and promised to email it to me. The officer taking statements mentioned that they might need us to testify, depending on how far the case went. He handed me his card, said they'd be in touch, and finally headed off to file the report. That could have been the end of it, but the next morning, things got stranger. I was sipping my coffee on the porch when a white sedan pulled up. Out stepped a man in a cheap gray suit, carrying a clipboard of his own. His tie was crooked, his shoes scuffed. "Mr. Fuller," he called out. "That's me," I said, setting my mug down. He jogged up to the porch, already flipping pages. "Name's Dean Marshall. I'm with the City Compliance Office. Seems there's been some interesting activity in your HOA." I raised an eyebrow. "Interesting how?" He looked uncomfortable, like he didn't know how much to say. "Let's just say after yesterday's incident, a few complaints surfaced, some anonymous, some not so much." He handed me a sheet of paper. It was a notice of investigation, officially stamped. Apparently, Karren had been involved in more than just harassing visitors. There were allegations of embezzlement, misuse of HOA funds, and even falsifying violations to levy fines against homeowners she didn't like. Marshall explained that under city ordinance, if an HOA is found engaging in criminal activities, the city can dissolve their authority and appoint a temporary trustee to manage the community until a new board is elected. "We've got a preliminary hearing set for next month," he said. "You'll probably be called as a witness." I leaned back against the porch railing, trying to absorb it all. "So she might not just lose her title, she could lose everything?" Marshall nodded grimly. "If the financial audits show what we think they will, prison's not off the table." After he left, I gathered a few of the neighbors who had seen everything. Mr. Tran, Mrs. Howell, even old Mr. Benson from down the block, who usually kept to himself, but had apparently been quietly documenting every shady move Karren made. We decided to form a neighborhood committee, unofficial for now, just to keep everyone informed. If Karren had allies on the board and tried to retaliate, we wanted a united front. The first order of business was compiling evidence. Mr. Tran distributed copies of his video. Mrs. Howell, it turned out, had photos of Karren inspecting properties without notice, which was another violation. Mr. Benson had spreadsheets of suspicious HOA dues increases over the past 2 years. We met in my backyard, sitting around folding tables, swapping stories and information. It felt good, like we were finally pulling together after years of being steamrolled. As the sun set, Dad grilled burgers for everyone. Mom passed around lemonade. Laughter floated into the warm evening air, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like a community again, not just a cluster of houses under someone's thumb. But I knew it wasn't over yet. People like Karren didn't go quietly. And sure enough, 3 days later, a letter showed up taped to my front door. No envelope, no postage, just a single sheet of paper with bold black letters. "You made a powerful enemy." There was no signature, but I didn't need one. Karren might have been in handcuffs, but she wasn't done. Not yet. I stood on the porch holding the letter, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the yard. The paper crinkled slightly in my grip, but I kept my expression neutral. From across the street, Mr. Benson gave me a small nod, as if he could tell something had shifted. I folded the note carefully, sliding it into a manila envelope along with the other evidence we were collecting. Later that evening, we gathered again, this time at Mr. Tran's house. His living room was cluttered with laptops, notepads, and a whiteboard full of names and dates. Everyone looked more serious than before. Mrs. Howell leaned forward, tapping her pen against her notepad. "We can't just sit around. If she's sending threats, what's next? Vandalism? Retaliation?" Mr. Benson adjusted his glasses. "We need to escalate this, go beyond the city. Bring in someone who can really dig." I set the letter on the coffee table, Already started. I contacted a friend of mine this morning. He's a private investigator, retired state police. He owes me a favor." The room buzzed with approval. Mrs. Howell clapped her hands once sharply. "Good. We need someone who knows the system inside and out." Mr. Tran pulled up a spreadsheet on his laptop. "I also did a little digging. Karren's been funneling HOA maintenance contracts to a company called Whitmore Solutions. Guess who owns it?" No one needed to guess. "She's been paying herself through fake invoices," Mr. Tran continued. "Tens of thousands over the past 2 years. Mrs. Howell whistled low. "That's fraud, serious fraud." "She's cooked her own goose," I said. "We just have to help turn up the heat." The plan came together quickly. Gather everything we had, send it to the city compliance office, and simultaneously file a criminal complaint with the district attorney. If we could prove financial crimes on top of the assault, it wouldn't just be Karren facing charges. Any board members complicit could go down with her. The next day, my friend Sam, the retired investigator, arrived. He was a big man, with sun-leathered skin and a voice like gravel. He didn't waste time. "She's desperate," he said after I showed him the letter. "Cornered animals lash out. You need to stay sharp." He spent the morning interviewing neighbors, taking copies of documents, and photographing the HOA office, which was suspiciously located in a shed behind Karren's house. No signage, no official records posted. By noon, Sam had enough to file a formal report with the city fraud unit. Meanwhile, I drove downtown to meet with Assistant District Attorney Marlene Vickers. She was no nonsense, with steel gray hair pulled into a tight bun and a handshake that could crush a brick. "We've had our eye on that HOA for a while," she said, flipping through the folder I handed her. "But until now, we didn't have anyone willing to step up." I leaned forward. "They've been intimidating people for years. It's time someone pushed back." Vickers nodded slowly. "We'll open an investigation. I'll assign it to our white-collar crimes unit. If your evidence holds up, we'll move on it hard." Driving back home, I felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread. We had lit the fuse. Now we had to see where it burned. That evening, as the sun dipped low, a black SUV rolled slowly down the street, pausing in front of my house. The windows were tinted too dark to see inside. I stood on the porch, arms crossed, refusing to budge. After a long, tense minute, the SUV moved on. "Mr. Tran came jogging over once it disappeared. "You see that?" "Yeah," I said. "She's trying to scare us." "She's already lost," he said firmly. "She just doesn't know it yet." The following week was a whirlwind. Investigators from the city arrived, flashing badges and asking questions. Subpoenas went out to the HOA board members. Bank accounts were frozen. Karren's allies scattered like cockroaches under a kitchen light. One morning, Mrs. Howell came by with a grin that could light up a stadium. "You here?" I shook my head. "They raided her house this morning. Took computers, files, everything." Sure enough, a few hours later, the news vans rolled in. Reporters swarmed the cul-de-sac, jostling for position. The headlines were brutal. "Local HOA president arrested for embezzlement, assault." Vickers held a press conference on the courthouse steps. She laid it all out. Karren had stolen over $80,000 from the HOA, fabricated fines to punish anyone who opposed her, and physically assaulted residents who challenged her authority. As she listed the charges, I couldn't help but notice Karren's face on the news footage, pale, drawn, and furious. She was being led into the courthouse in cuffs again, but this time with no hope of wriggling free. That night, the neighborhood threw a block party. Not an official one, just an impromptu celebration. Kids rode their bikes up and down the street, music blared from portable speakers, and the smell of barbecue filled the air. Mr. Benson raised a solo cup toward me. "To standing up." I clinked mine against his. "To taking back our home." As the stars came out overhead, Sam approached, slipping a file into my hand. "Thought you might want to see the final report," he said. "She's looking at serious time and restitution." I flipped through it quickly. The evidence was overwhelming. falsified invoices, fake contractor signatures, even a few bank transfers to an account in Belize. She won't be running anything from a jail cell, Sam added. Across the street, Mrs. Howell set up a folding table piled high with pies and brownies. Mr. Tran organized a pickup basketball game with the teenagers. The fear that had hung over the neighborhood for so long was gone, replaced by something lighter, freer. As the night wore on, people started talking about forming a new HOA board, one actually elected, with open meetings and transparent finances. No one wanted to repeat the mistakes of the past. When the city compliance officer, Marshall, stopped by to check in, he found himself roped into a game of cornhole and left with a plate full of ribs and potato salad. Before he left, he pulled me aside. "You did a good thing here," he said. "Most people just roll over," I shrugged. "Sometimes you have to plant your feet and say enough," he grinned. "Well, you planted them good." As I watched him drive away, I realized something important. We hadn't just stopped Karren, we'd built something stronger, a real community. And no matter what came next, we were ready for it together. The next few days felt like a whirlwind pulling the entire neighborhood along with it. With Karren facing criminal charges and the board scrambling to distance themselves, the landscape of our community shifted faster than anyone could have predicted. On Wednesday morning, I was out watering the front lawn when a city vehicle pulled up. A woman in a navy pantsuit stepped out, her demeanor brisk but polite. She introduced herself as Investigator Dana Whitlock from the State Department of Regulatory Affairs. "Mr. Fuller," she said, flipping open a leather-bound notepad, "I'm here about the broader investigation into your HOA. We've uncovered some significant developments." I set the hose down and waved her toward the porch where we sat in the shade. "We've confirmed that the embezzlement is just one piece," she continued. "We located off-book accounts tied to your HOA's tax identification number. Funds were siphoned into shell companies, and a portion was traced to personal luxury expenditures, vacations, jewelry, even a private yacht rental." I blinked. "A yacht," she nodded grimly, "and it gets worse." An audit revealed that Karren and at least 2 other board members altered community maintenance reports to pocket insurance payouts. They staged damages, fake roof leaks, fabricated plumbing issues, and pocketed the claim money. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of it settle in. "So it's insurance fraud on top of everything else." Whitlock's pen tapped lightly against her notepad. "Exactly. We're coordinating with the state attorney's office. There will be additional criminal charges filed against her and any conspirators." Before she left, she handed me an official notice. The HOA's charter had been suspended pending a special hearing. Until then, a court-appointed trustee would manage all affairs. By evening, word had spread like wildfire. Neighbors gathered again, this time in the open, laughing, talking, planning. Without Karren's iron grip, the atmosphere felt different, looser, more hopeful. As the sun began to set, Mr. Tran approached, his arms full of flyers. "We're organizing a town hall," he said, handing me one. "At the community center. We're electing a new board, transparent and open to everyone." I took the flyer, scanning the simple, bold letters. It felt right. It felt earned. The night of the town hall, the community center was packed. Folding chairs filled every inch of the floor, and people stood along the walls. Sam, my investigator friend, sat near the back, arms crossed, quietly observing. At the front, a small podium had been set up. Mrs. Howell stood behind it, clearing her throat. "Neighbors," she began, her voice strong, "we've been through hell. But tonight we take the first step toward building something better." Applause erupted, loud and genuine. Speeches followed, not the slick, rehearsed kind, but heartfelt promises from people who genuinely cared. Mr. Benson volunteered to oversee finances. Mr. Tran proposed an open-door policy for all meetings. Younger families suggested community events to rebuild trust. When my turn came, I stepped up to the podium, feeling the weight of 100 eyes on me. "I'm not running for anything," I said. I just want to say this, we stood up when it counted. We didn't let fear or intimidation win, and because of that, we have a chance to fix what was broken. As I stepped down, the applause was deafening. Voting was simple. Slips of paper, counted in the open, no secret handshakes or backroom deals. By night's end, we had a new board, every member chosen by an overwhelming majority. 2 days later, the final hammer fell. Karren was indicted on multiple counts: assault, embezzlement, insurance fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The district attorney's office released a statement confirming that the evidence was overwhelming and that a plea deal would not be offered. At her arraignment, held in the packed county courthouse, Karren appeared gaunt, her once meticulously styled hair hanging limp around her face. She wore a wrinkled gray suit that seemed 2 sizes too big. Judge Harmon, a stern woman known for her no-nonsense approach, glanced over her glasses at Karren before speaking. Given the scope of your offenses, the breach of public trust, and the substantial financial harm caused to this community, bail is denied. Karren's knees buckled slightly as the bailiff led her away. There was no dramatic outburst, no final threats, just a hollow silence as the courtroom doors swung shut behind her. Afterward, a small group of us gathered outside the courthouse. No celebration, no cheers, just a quiet sense of closure. Sam clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You did more than just save your parents from a bully," he said. "You gave this whole neighborhood its soul back." Mr. Tran nodded. "If you hadn't stood your ground when you did, she would have kept bleeding us dry, Mrs." Howell pulled a folded paper from her purse. It was a petition to formally dissolve the old HOA and create a new one under a different charter, with strict bylaws preventing any future abuses. She already had over 100 signatures. "We're naming it after the old oak tree at the center of the park," she said with a small smile. "Symbol of strength, roots that run deep." Weeks passed and the community continued to heal. The new board held regular meetings under the shade of that old oak tree, open to anyone who wanted to attend. Budgets were published monthly. Maintenance crews actually showed up when called. Kids played freely in the parks again without being chased off for imagined infractions. One Saturday, while walking my parents to their car after another visit, my dad paused and looked around. "You built something good here, son," he said quietly. I shrugged. "Took a whole neighborhood." Mom hugged me tightly. "You reminded them they could fight back." As they drove off, I stood at the curb for a moment, watching the sunlight dance through the leaves of the oak tree. The air smelled like fresh cut grass and barbecue. Laughter and conversation drifted from porches up and down the street. The scars Karren left behind would take time to fully heal. But we weren't victims anymore. We were neighbors, we were a community, and we weren't going to let anyone take that from us again.